You're listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League Daily episode for January 19th, 2018. Today I'm joined by Seamoose, an Overwatch player, caster, and analyst to discuss last night's matches. For the first match of the evening, we got to see the preseason rematch between the Dallas Fuel and the Houston Outlaws. The Outlaws narrowly lost to the Fuel in the preseason as the match was decided in 5 maps, 3-2. Hoping things would go the other way around this time, Jake and the Outlaws really had to step it up. Spoilers, they did. It all started on Junkertown. Dallas decided to make some changes to their lineup, putting Mickey on Roadhog and bringing in Custa on support. This one didn't go well at all, to say the least. The Outlaws put on a show holding the Fuel just shy of point A. Houston then walks the payload to the checkpoint with over 2.5 minutes to spare. Things didn't get much better on Horizon Lunar Colony. The Fuel stumbled on their point A offense, but managed to capture the point with a little over 90 seconds to spare. With 5.5 minutes to capture point B, the Fuel were looking for a quick cap. However, between strong support play from Raucus and Bonnie, Jake's patented aggressive Junkrat, and Linkster's harassing of supports on Tracer, the Fuel would fail to take even one tick on point B. Are you getting the picture? The Outlaws then take out the Fuel on Oasis 2-0. At this point, we still haven't seen Taimu. So with the match now being lost for the Fuel, we go to Eichenwald. Taimu is in and within the first minute leads the Fuel to a quick point A capture. Things looked good for the Fuel, but in the end they stalled out just shy of the bridge in the second point. Ultimately, this was a one-sided match that favored the Outlaws beginning to end. Houston takes this one 4 maps to 0. So early on in this match between the Fuel and the Outlaws, we saw the Fuel make some changes that we hadn't really seen before. We saw Mickey on a Roadhog, Seagull was in for Taimu, Chips was on Bastion while Harry Hook was on the bench. Do you have any idea what Dallas was trying to achieve with these changes?
Do I have an idea of what they were trying to achieve? No. It very clearly was an attempt to try and, play a different roster than what would perhaps be most optimal to see how the players would play under pressure. However, with that in mind, that's good to do at a scrim. I don't think the stage of the Overwatch League is exactly the best way to start that off, Obviously, it's still very early into the season. There's a ton of games to be played, but it's still pretty early into the playoffs. And considering what we know as far as Taimu being a very vocal player, also being a very proficient Roadhog, Mickey not so much being a great carry off tank. Just overall, there were a couple of questionable roster decisions that clearly didn't work out. And now I would assume we don't see those permutations again, at least with those heroes, because it didn't work out.
This is kind of a weird thing to see, former Envious, now Dallas Fuel, get their butts handed to them, basically, in the way that they did. Do you think that maybe this was something from their coach Kai, maybe trying to make a bigger long-term decision for the team in direction versus, hey, let's just switch things up this week?
Yeah, so Kai is going to receive, and he already has received, a lot of criticism for his decision-making so far, at least in terms of the roster that they put out. And the thing is, on the one hand, the community and the outside perception, we have no idea what the players communicate like. Unless you're in the scene. You have no real idea of what the scrimmages are like, whether things worked or not. However, based off of the information that we do have, that we've seen consistently done, some of the decisions Kai made did seem a bit stretched. Like, they didn't seem as if, it was in a situation in which what other result would you expect other than these players not working well together, or this particular pick not working out for that particular player. So I'm not really sure, to be honest. I kind of go back to what I said earlier, is that you can try things out, but unless they were really confident on the strategies that they ran out today, which didn't seem to be the case, and that really isn't the right place to do it, because it's not something that actually is relevant the early season in terms of if you actually qualify the playoffs, no one's going to remember the early season, but how your players feel about morale, how your fans feel about, this big in-state rivalry, your arch rivals, how the sponsors feel about the investment. All of that stuff actually matters. So if this was an attempt to try something, and Kai knew that it might fail, I definitely think that was the wrong decision. If he was honestly sure that it was likely to succeed and it was a surprise that it didn't succeed, then it's honestly quite shocking that that's the conclusion he came to, because it didn't seem as if that was likely going to be a roster that would be useful. I respect a coach trying to gain information out of a potentially risky maneuver, but it still doesn't seem like there was much upside to the information they gained from that loss versus their other two losses, for example.
Let's talk about the Outlaws, because I think it's really easy to say, the Dallas Fuel lost this match, but at the same time, the Outlaws, they played really well.
It was beautiful. I mean, for the Outlaws, love them or hate them, they're certainly a very popular team when it comes to the perception of the community. There's a lot of discussion about them. That was a team that really knew to play to their strengths. Jake was this super, super aggressive player on the Pharah, on the Junkyard, on the Genji. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it doesn't. But he's always so aggressive that it makes space for Linkser, that it makes space for Raucus, these players that are silent but from the back line, and if they're uncontested, just completely dominate the game. And the rest of the team just plays around it so well. And Jake, obviously touted as this great shot caller. Yeah, he's the kind of guy, he's the kind of shot caller that is the general riding into battle first. And sometimes that gets him blown up, but most of the time we see him go off with these crazy Junkrat plays. And it's really commendable that that Houston had found that kind of identity. Now we'll see whether or not they stick to it, because I would say, at least from what we saw, the combination of the rosters they had today was their best combination of players. And I was actually particularly impressed by Bonnie as well. But yeah, Houston, it was a 4-0, and a 4-0 means that one team lost really hard, but also means one team won really hard, and Houston definitely deserved that win.
Next, we saw the New York Excelsior take on the Los Angeles Valiant, and what fans were hoping to be a close match between two teams vying for their spot in the top four. In Week 1, Soon put up a near MVP-worthy performance as they would sweep the Shock and defeat the Fuel 3-0. On the other side, the Excelsior had a strong Week 1, defeating the Outlaws and the Uprising 3-1. On Junkertown, the Excelsior barely finished the map in overtime. However, Envy and the Valiant would be unable to push the cart all the way to the second point. NYXL 1, Valiant 0. Next, we go to Horizon Lunar Colony. Despite a strong point A take by the NYXL running a quad tank composition with over 3 minutes to spare, New York would stall out on point B for over 6.5 minutes, only ever getting one tick. Things looked promising for the Valiant to be able to take this one, however they failed to get any sort of offense going and get full held. NYXL 2, Valiant 0. On Oasis, we saw some great back and forth, and it seemed as though the Valiant were coming alive. However, it was ultimately Pines McCree that would give the NYXL the edge, winning this map 2-1. For the final map, we go to Nimbani. Both teams finished the map, though Valiant finished in overtime. NYXL has 2 minutes to take one tick of point A to win the map, but they failed to do so. This one ends in a draw. After all is said and done, the Valiant struggle as the New York Excelsior take the series 3-0 with one draw. So talking about the NYXL and the Valiant, I think people expected this one, or at least hoped for it to be closer than it actually was. What did you see the NYXL do to really kind of distance themselves from the Valiant in terms of just skill and overall gameplay?
So I really like the Valiant players. I like the organization. I didn't actually expect this game to be very close, although in hindsight, making a prediction is kind of weak, so I'll back it up. I didn't think Valiant had very effective opponents when it came to their matches, and NYXL pound for pound was better, but NYXL also had a much better understanding of the macro game. You saw, like, early on, the routes that they were taking, the strategies on both Junkertown and Lunar Horizon Colony. They had a very clear idea of what the game plan was, and that was something that the Valiant really couldn't react to. The Valiant, in the past, just seemed to kind of outmuscle their opponents, but up against NYXL, they were systematically taken apart because NYXL consistently had a good strategy to try and take them down. And with that in mind as well, later on in the series, actually, you kind of saw the Valiant, getting it together to a degree. Their dives were finally better coordinated. Oasis was pretty close, but it was just kind of too little too late, And I mean, NYXL, the fact that they very specifically abused the weak scouting Valiant had was one of the big things that gave them the advantage in that match.
How about let's talk about Soon for a second, because in week 1, I mean, Soon, outside of Fleta just going off, Soon kind of had an MVP worthy week. He had a phenomenal week on Tracer, specifically probably one of the best weeks on Tracer that we've seen. And then Envy, of course, always performs really well, but they seem to just kind of be gone in this matchup. What do you think happened there with those two players? Was it NYXL countering them? Were they not rising to the challenge?
That was the tougher competition, the toughest competition that Valiant had ever seen, where Soon and Envy had room to maneuver in their previous games. But I mean, NYXL, going back through the VOD, nearly always Valiant was playing at the pace of NYXL. And that can be something that's especially in game, but also because the players are so, the amped up energy could be so difficult to identify. But even for a newer viewer for Overwatch, understanding the pace and tempo of the match could be hard to really visualize in a game. But if a team is playing consistently to put their opponent on the back foot, their star players, such as Soon, such as Envy, who previously may have had a ton of room, whether due to negligence on their opponents or because their team was creating space for them, those star players are just going to be really dull because they don't have the space, they don't have the opportunity to pop off. Sure, you can say that ultimately they might have had weaker performances individually than their first two matches, but a big part of that was simply because NYXL not only offensively but really defensively had a much better time locking them down and just making the Valiant come to them, so to speak.
So despite the Valiant's previous performance, this has to be kind of a huge punch in the gut for Valiant fans. They looked so good going into it. They were one of the only undefeated teams in the league going into this. People were kind of pegging them for top 5, top 4, some even top 3. Where do you think they fall now that they've gotten a piece of a big 3 team and didn't exactly walk away from it feeling very good?
Yeah, the smallest nice thing that the Valiant can take away is the fact that their last 2 maps are pretty good, and considering how poorly they performed the first 2 maps, the fact that at halftime they come back and show up a little bit better is at least something that shows some mental fortitude. Because it was a tie for the last map, and Oasis was reasonably close. But yeah, man, I don't think Valiant's position particularly changes. I still think they're around 4 or 5 if they have a terrible season, maybe 6. But the thing is, I think this really just showed us what exactly the difference is between the top 3, aka the full Korean teams, and everybody else. It's a very big divide, and for the Valiant, in terms of the pieces that they have, could they potentially make a team that next time they play NYXL, the team that knows how to really take it to them? They can, but this was kind of like a reality check where the Valiant were so super hyped up. They hadn't lost a single map. They're the only undefeated team in the league, the best Western team. Well, the best Western team is really impressive, but when you go up against a Korean team, a full Korean team, that is the level of play you have to play at. And this is an example of a team losing, and it was embarrassing. Sure, it was a 3-0, but this is a good loss. I think it'll teach them a lot. I don't think they're going to be able to recover and scratch off and be like 10-1 after a couple weeks. I think they'll still have a couple of troubles in the coming weeks, but I think a loss like this will tell them a lot, and they'll improve from it.
The Gladiators and the Fusion are both teams that have been difficult to place this early in the season. The Gladiators swept the worst team in the league, Shanghai, before getting swept by the best team in the league, Seoul. So basically, we can tell very little by their regular season performance so far. The Fusion came out strong in week 1 to defeat the Outlaws, but since then were swept by London before narrowly defeating the Shock 2-1. Yesterday was not a day for completing Junkertown as the Fusion would stall out before the final point. However, thanks to a strong defensive showing from Carpe and Poco, the Fusion are able to hold the Gladiators to just 1 point. On Anubis, both teams would finish the map, though the Gladiators would do this in overtime. With just over a minute in the time bank to take the first tick on point A, Carpe will snipe Shaz to give the Fusion the advantage. When Big Goose goes to resurrect Shaz, Carpe snipes Big Goose. From there, the dominoes fell, and the Fusion take the map 3-2. At this point, things look bleak for the Gladiators, but they weren't done. On Ilios, Hydration and Asher put on a stellar showing to take the map 2-1. Then on Mbani, the Gladiators take another close map 3-2. Finally, we go to Lijiang Tower for a tiebreaker. The Gladiators had all the momentum in this one and would take the map 2-0. Los Angeles completes the reverse sweep 3-2. So the Fusion versus Gladiators looked to be the more tame matchup this week, and we were like, oh, maybe we can go to bed after the first two, matches happened, but this was not the case after we went into 5. It was really close. We saw the reverse sweep.
Best one.
It was the best
match,
one. Who, in your mind, had the biggest impact on the outcome overall?
I would say, this is going to be a cop-out answer, but I would actually say Gladiators coaching staff.
Ooh.
Because they did some compositional choices all the way to the 5th game that were not questionable, as in, like, that's just terrible, but it's, like, questionable in the sense that I don't really know what they're trying for, but clearly they have a strategy in mind, and it worked. For example, triple DPS on Garden Lijiang Tower. And the fact that they were able to keep their team mentally in it, going down 2-0, coming back to reverse sweep. The first reverse sweep we've seen so far in the Overwatch League. If I'm not mistaken, it's the second one, the second 5-game series, that we've seen at all. It's really impressive, and I'm going to betray how much of a fanboy I am of this team. I have a lot of respect for the coaching staff. I think the way that they're organizing their 7-man roster is much more intelligent than some of these 10 to 12-man rosters that we've seen. And yeah, I would say in terms of overall, like, who was the most influential, I'll probably give it to the coaches because all 3 of the DPS for that team were popping off. And overall, at least for the Gladiators, there were impressive moments individually, but no standout performance overall. Honorable mention, though, Poco, because he was absolutely crushing it again. Even the matches that Philadelphia lost, he was still really impressive. And not even the fact that he got so many self-destruct kills, because those were still insane, and he consistently still got a bunch. But the fact that he was also generating his D.Va ultimate so quickly, he's sort of redefined D.Va play in a way that we've never seen before in Overwatch, and it's actually fantastically impressive when a player takes a hero like this that everyone thinks is well understood and really shows that there's a deeper level to her gameplay that no one else was at before.
So despite losing, how do you feel that the Fusion performed overall?
Fusion's problems were pretty similar still to what you would expect in terms of, coordination was hit or miss. Neptuno kind of had a bad game near the end there for sure, although I'm pretty sure he's a big part of their shot calling core. I don't think it was particularly too surprising. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I was actually kind of hyped about this match, and then it turned out to be super, super great, because I had no idea who was going to win this. Like, going into this matchup, I kind of hoped Gladiators would win. I honestly thought Philadelphia Fusion had the edge. We saw Shadowburn make Shadowburn plays, we saw Carpe make Carpe plays, but the reason why the Fusion lost was still because, they weren't as cohesive. They didn't have, at least compared to the Gladiators, in between every fight, it wasn't like the players were setting up in these positions and they knew exactly what to do. They still need to kind of find out their identity, how exactly they're going to play around their star DPS, and they'll be able to come back. So even though the Philadelphia Fusion lost, it wasn't in a way that was shocking per se, because it was still mostly because, okay, the reverse sweep was impressive. Perhaps they crumbled and tilted a little bit at the end, but a lot of the mistakes they had, even in the maps they won, were coordination issues.
Last question, and I'll let you go. After this one, where do you think that Philadelphia ranks after this match? They came out hot, right? And they were really people were really excited, and I saw some people putting them in their top 4. But now that we've kind of seen Philly come down a little bit, where do you think they rank?
After 3 matches, That's kind of hard to gauge.
Predict the future for me, please.
Well, the 40 games. Oh man, I would say, and I thought this. Ironically, I thought this is an old phase with Shatterbird, like way back in the day, up until when they had Carpe as well. I think that in terms of their overall, specifically DPS, but now we see Poco and Fraggy, who are also individually fantastic. They might have pound for pound one of the best teams, one of the best rosters in the league. Top 2, top 3 or 4 easily, like top 4. If they're able to coordinate that by the end of the season, they could be, I don't think they'll be a favorite, but they could literally be an underdog to win the championship. However, I actually think the chance of that future happening is going to be unlikely, and I think they'll end up as a average middle of the pack team, especially if they continue to have the issues they had against a team like Gladiators, which definitely has weaker pound for pound players, but just was a better team overall and played better as a unit. So in my mind, I see Philadelphia Fusion probably being middle of the pack team. At worst, they could maybe be like bottom 8, like 8th place, maybe 9th. At best, 5 months from now, we could see them in the top 4 or potentially the finals of the league.
My thanks to Seamoose for stopping by the show today. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at SeamooseA. For the matches tonight, we've got the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Boston Uprising at 4 p.m. Pacific. At 6 p.m., we got the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Florida Mayhem. And then at 8 p.m., we've got the London Spitfire taking on the Dallas Fuel. Afterwards, I'll be joined by ZP. We'll go ahead and discuss tonight's matches for tomorrow's episode. Remember, you can find the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets, including iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, and Google Podcast. If you like the show and want to support, head on over to patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. We're also on the front page of winstonslab.com. Go ahead, listen to the shows there, and check out all of the latest Overwatch League stats. We're also on YouTube. Click on the link in the show notes to find us. And if you want to stay in touch, email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com, tweet me at OWL Daily Show, or join our Discord at discord.me/OWL Daily Show. And of course, you can find links to everything and more at overwatchleaguedaily.com. That's going to do it for this episode. I'll be back tomorrow with ZP for another one.